about this game. Become a Veil Warden. A guardian of the land of Or, protector of the people and spirits that call Or home. Discover untold stories and forge lasting bonds with your fellow players as you glide, leap, sprint, and ride your way across a frontier with adventure around every corner. Welcome to Tyria. Stand with mighty heroes as you face Char warbands sweeping across Ascalon, battle rival gangs in the streets of Canaan City, and cross the sulphurous wasteland of the Desolation astride a Yanundu worm. Set events in motion that will shape centuries to come. Guild Wars 2 is an award-winning online role-playing game with fast-paced action combat. It doesn't have action combat. Deep character customization, and no subscription fee required. Choose from an arsenal of professions and weapons, explore a vast open world, compete in PvP modes, and more. Now, if you've seen the trailers that I put in the background while watching this, I think it's became very, very clear that the tone and setting have been largely changed throughout the course of Guild Wars, especially now, because Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 followed the events of the Guild Wars, which was a very, I'm not very familiar with the lore, but assuming it was a very war-riddled time period in Tyria, and therefore both Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 were heavily focused on war and like resolving the conflict, adding more conflict. Like, it is a lot more underlying darkness, battle, and just war involved. Guild Wars 3 is completely going the opposite direction. And that also comes with a massive shift in art style, not only in tone, but the art style itself has, well, a lot of people have said degraded from something very unique, painting, oil painting style from Guild Wars 2 into high guard UE5 slop. Those are the most obvious things that people are already kind of ignoring, but there has been a lot more that they have talked about that makes it pretty clear that most people are quite wrong about Guild Wars 3 and what it's even supposed to be. First of all, let's talk about their YouTube description here, because I find that very interesting, and we'll get into it. I'll just read it first. Explore Tyria like never before in Guild Wars 3, an action-adventure MMORPG and modern evolution of the genre. That could mean anything. Usually that means it's not really an MMORPG. Like, a lot of newer age games are saying they're MMOs, and they're an evolution of MMOs of some sort, but they're actually just not the same genre at all. Play solo or form a band of adventurers, forging impactful and enduring bonds with fellow players. A formative cast of memorable NPCs and the nature spirits that call Or home. That is a very flaccid description of a Guild Wars 3 kind of game. We know that it's set in the past, before the events of the Guild Wars even happened, but this obviously does not sound like at all like the same description they used for any other Guild Wars game. And it becomes very clear quickly. A lot of people on Twitter pointed out, oh, by the way, you can play Guild Wars 2 solo already and Guild Wars 1, so it fit. No. This kind of wording is not really used in MMORPGs ever. Not because it's wrong, but because it gives the wrong impression of what the game is. Experience Guild Wars Reforged, the award-winning online role-playing game enjoyed by millions, now re-energized with system enhancements. From the fall of Ascalon to the desperate stand against Nightfall, every campaign is a chapter in Tyria's epic history. Your adventure is just getting started. And I would argue Guild Wars 1 is the most solo. Well, it's not even really an MMO in the traditional sense, and they don't use wording like this here either. This kind of wording is more akin to something like Where Winds Meet, Honor of King's World, like games that are mostly single player and you can opt into a more multiplayer co-op experience. It doesn't mean anything, it's just semantics at the end of the day, but it's one piece of the puzzle that I think people are getting wrong. And another major part that I believe makes it look a lot less like a traditional MMORPG with a shared world experience is this part of the announcement trailer. This wall running kind of approach, which also implies he runs all the way to the top of the mountain, so it has a very lenient stamina system. This is not really like traversal that is that easy, and vertical is usually not used by MMORPGs unless it's through flying mounts, which most people already hate in and of itself. This again reminds me a lot more of something like Tower of Fantasy, which was also promoted as an MMORPG, but it really wasn't. Or even games like Genshin again, or like gacha games in general, open world gacha games that are kind of emulating MMORPGs in a lot of ways, but in a single player environment most of the time. And I am personally a action combat enjoyer, and they keep promoting action combat as Guild Wars 3 like flagship feature. But there's one major problem with this. Guild Wars 3 is console crossplay, meaning it is made for PS5 and PC at the same time. There has not been a singular MMORPG ever that was genuinely successful as a crossplay title, first of all. Secondly, the way action combat is usually described in console games is not really action combat the way BDO or Lost Ark are action combat. It's more auto-targeting, it's more lock-on targeting like Souls-like games, it's more controller-based action combat, which isn't really action combat at all because the game forces you and leads you the right way, so aiming becomes easier. Even games like FPS shooter games have to force auto aim and aim assist down players' throats because controllers are generally a lot less precise than a mouse is. What usually happens, the weakest link of the chain usually gets to be the main platform for this development, and in this case it's PlayStation 5. And that is a major problem. So as I said, historically speaking, this will never go well. And if it goes well, it's not because it's a traditional MMORPG. That's also something that we have to really mention here. This is not something Guild Wars has ever done before in this way. Guild Wars 1 and 2 were strict PC titles, and this is a major departure from that, because the control scheme is very limited on a controller, meaning UI elements, control elements in general, and that obviously includes combat elements, are usually quite restrictive on a controller, especially for 3D games. If this was a 2D game, that would be maybe a slightly different story, but in a 3D environment, controllers are quite inferior for control methods and UI. And I think the best console and PC crossplay combat system, by the way, is Monster Hunter, which is also getting an update next year. But that's besides the point. Even that game has insane input problems, key mapping issues for PC, and dog shit UI. So generally speaking, console PC crossplay is an instant red flag for any PC-oriented MMORPG. And probably the most damning evidence of my claim that this is probably not a proper MMORPG is the most recent dev interview video that just released yesterday.
When Guild Wars 1 was our only live game, we faced a similar moment concerning the future of the franchise. And as we shifted our focus to Guild Wars 2, we moved most of the studio to work on it. New content in Guild Wars 1 slowly went away, year over year, before stopping entirely as we approached the release of Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars is a very different game than its sequel, and by making the decision we did, we lost the ability to explore that space. We are not repeating the same approach as we did all those years ago. If we did, we would have stopped development on Guild Wars 2 more than a year ago. Instead, we've continued live development on Guild Wars 2, launched the game on Steam and Epic Game Store, and we've released 3 expansions in 3 years. We've seen Guild Wars 2 thrive, all while ramping up development for Guild Wars 3 simultaneously in the background. At the same time, we tested something new with Guild Wars 1 by reinvesting in the game and creating Guild Wars Reforged to see what would happen. And what we learned was clear. When we support these worlds, players show up, both returning veterans and entirely new fans of the Guild Wars franchise. Those experiences shaped how we're handling this moment. So here's our new commitment: Guild Wars Reforged, Guild Wars 2, and Guild Wars 3 when it launches. All 3 games share the world of Tyria. They are intentionally very different in design, in experience, and where they sit on the timeline.
Intentionally very different in design, in experience, and where they sit on the timeline.
So what he's saying is essentially, since Guild Wars 1 was cool, very, very different than Guild Wars 2, which means Guild Wars 1 was more of a instanced game and much less of an MMORPG, Guild Wars 2 moved very directly and intentionally into the MMORPG shared world experience space, which made them both very different games, and they regret not having put more effort into Guild Wars 1 when they made that shift, because they're such different games that they appeal to different audiences. Now, the same thing he's saying now, he's saying the move from Guild Wars 2 to Guild Wars 3 is a massive shift in genre, probably, which would allow them to have basically 3 different games in the same world with different audiences. Meaning, Guild Wars 3 is intentionally not a sequel to Guild Wars 2, which is, by the way, Guild Wars 3 is a prequel, right? Which is also kind of a strange thing to do for an MMORPG in and of itself, because MMORPGs kind of need this infinity feeling situation where you don't know what's going to happen next, and the game could basically go on forever. That you can't really do that in a prequel as much. So I think this is a fundamental shift away from the traditional MMORPG into something like Where Winds Meet Space, maybe. Something that can have shared world stuff, but mostly is like your own thing, and you can choose to play solo, or you can choose to play in a group, right? That's my guess. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope I'm wrong, obviously, because I want a proper full-fledged MMORPG to play, because there is literally nothing going on. But it really doesn't sound like it. And the trailer doesn't show it. The art style is kind of strange. The entire setup is weird. A lot less about PvP, a lot less about war in general. The art style has taken a major shift. Like, everything they're saying is kind of the opposite of an MMORPG. So, all I'm saying is hold your horses. Don't get too overly hyped for this if you're looking to play an MMORPG, because this might not really be the same thing. But only time will tell. Since we haven't seen any gameplay, obviously, it's very hard to make a proper statement about anything, because they literally didn't show anything. So we just have to wait and see. But so far, this is what I think and where this game is going. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Peace.